This really happened to me, though. Sometimes I still can't believe it myself. I was sitting in my sister's living room in Charleston, South Carolina, when my own nephew stood up during dinner, smirked in front of everyone, and announced that I was too old and senile to manage my late brother's estate. He had the audacity to wave a stack of papers in my face, legal-looking documents. He claimed proved I'd already signed away my rights. My fork clattered against the china plate, my hands shook, and in that moment, surrounded by family and so-called friends, I realized he had been plotting behind my back for months, maybe years, to strip me of everything I had left. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. Tell us where you're from and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. That night shattered me. But before I tell you how I brought my smug nephew to his knees, I need to take you back a little, because you have to understand how he got his hooks into my family and how I nearly lost everything before I learned how to fight back. My name is Robert, though most folks just call me Bob. I was 68 when this whole nightmare began. Charleston had been my home for decades, a city where the humidity clings to your skin like an old shirt, and the salty tang of the Atlantic lingers in the air no matter where you go. I had a simple, quiet life. My brother Daniel had passed the year before from a heart attack, and it had left me gutted. He and I had been inseparable since childhood. Growing up in Colombia, we shared everything from a rusted-out Chevy we rebuilt in our 20s, to the family fishing trips down at Folly Beach Daniels. Passing left me with his half of our father's estate. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough a couple of rental properties on Meeting Street, some savings, and a modest slice of land outside Somerville, where we'd always talked about building a cabin. More than the money, though it was the legacy. Our father had broken his back in construction work to leave us something. Daniel and I vowed never to squander it, but grief has a way of leaving cracks in the armor. Into those cracks, my nephew Marcus slithered. Marcus was Daniel's only son. He was 34 at the time, slick, handsome in a smug sort of way, with hair always slicked back and a silver watch flashing on his wrist. He worked in real estate development, or so he claimed, but from what I gathered, it was more smoke and mirrors than substance. His Instagram was full of rented cars, staged photos with champagne, and captions about grinding and winning. The truth was, Marcus was a hustler, a man who wanted to skip the years of hard work Daniel and I had put in and go straight to the spoils. After Daniel's funeral, Marcus started hovering around me. At first, I thought it was grief. He'd come by my place with takeout from Fleet, landing saying he didn't want me eating alone. He'd call and ask about the properties, about carrying the torch for his dad, and I, a grieving old fool, welcomed the company. My sister had her own family to lean on, and most of my friends were either gone or scattered. Marcus filled the silence, but slowly the questions started changing. Instead of "how are you holding up?" it became, "do you think you'll really want to manage all those rental units at your age?" Instead of "what would Dad have done with that land?" it became, a developer like me could flip that for triple its value. I brushed it off at first, but the seed was planted. The real breaking point came that night at my sister's house. It was supposed to be a simple family dinner: shrimp and grits, cornbread and peach cobbler, the way my sister always made it when we gathered. Marcus brought his girlfriend, a thin blonde named Alyssa, who wore too much perfume, and laughed a little too loudly at his jokes. We were halfway through dinner when Marcus cleared his throat, stood and tapped his glass with a fork like he was about to make a toast. Uncle Bob, he said, pulling the stack of papers from his leather briefcase. We need to talk about the estate, about the rentals, about Dad's land. I frowned, my fork pausing midair. What about it? You've been managing it, sure, but let's be real. You're pushing 70. This is a lot of responsibility. I've drawn up a plan where you transfer management to me. You still get a stipend, of course, but I take care of everything else. He flipped through the papers, sliding them toward me like it was already decided. All you gotta do is sign. The room fell silent. My sister looked down at her plate. Alyssa smirked like she was in on the joke. I never agreed. To this I said, my voice shaky but firm. Marcus chuckled. Actually, Uncle Bob, you did. He pulled another paper from the stack and waved it in the air. See, this is the agreement from last month when we talked after dinner at your place. You signed here. I stared at the signature. It looked like mine, but it wasn't. I hadn't signed a damn thing. My stomach churned, my face burned with humiliation. Bob, my sister whispered. Maybe it's for the best. You could use the help. Marcus grinned, a predator scenting blood. Come on, Uncle, don't make this hard. That was the moment the hook sank in deep. That was the moment I realized my own flesh and blood was trying to rob me blind, and my family was ready to let him. I didn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned in my bed, the ceiling fan whirring above me like a metronome ticking down to some inevitable end. I couldn't get Marcus' smug grin out of my head. Or the way my sister had looked at me like maybe I was already too old, too broken to fight. But the thing about me, I may be old, but I'm not done. And I wasn't about to let some slick, wannabe mogul steal what my father had bled for. The next morning I made coffee black strong and sat at my kitchen table with the papers. Marcus had tried to shove in front of me. I had slipped them out when no one was looking. My hands trembled as I studied the signature. The notary stamp, the typed clauses that basically handed everything over to Marcus. It was clean, professional, convincing too. Convincing I didn't remember signing. I didn't remember a notary. And I sure as hell didn't remember agreeing to a stipend that was barely enough to cover groceries. I picked up the phone and called my old friend Henry. He had been a lawyer in Charleston for 30 years before retiring, the kind of guy who always knew the right people. When he answered groggy and gruff, I wasted no time. Henry, I said, I think my nephew is trying to screw me out of the estate. There was a pause, then a sigh. Come by this afternoon. Bring the papers. That afternoon, I drove downtown to Henry's place off Broad Street. His townhouse smelled faintly of cigar smoke and old books. He sat me down in his study, slipped on a pair of reading glasses, and pored over the documents. Bob, he said, finally setting them down. This is bad. If this goes uncontested, Marcus will have full control within weeks. The notary seal is real. The signature is close enough to pass. This looks airtight. But I didn't sign, I protested. I'd remember, I believe you, Henry said. But courts don't run on belief, they run on proof. And right now, Marcus has the upper hand. The words sank like stones in my gut. Marcus had me cornered, legally, socially, even within my own family. But Henry leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Thing is, Bob, if Marcus really forged this, he made mistakes. Nobody forges without leaving cracks. You'd just have to be willing to fight and fight hard. I gripped the arms of the chair. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. From resolve, then that's what'll do. That was the day everything changed. That was the day I decided I wasn't just going to survive. Marcus' betrayal. I was going to make him regret ever thinking he could play me for a fool. But revenge is a long game. And Marcus wasn't just greedy. He was careful. If I was going to bring him down, I'd need more than anger. It'd need patience, strategy, and proof. The first step was watching and waiting. He'll never forget the first real crack I spotted in Marcus' mask. It was a week later at one of the rental units on Meeting Street. He'll never forget the first real crack I spotted in Marcus' mask. It was a week later at one of the rental units on Meeting Street. The tenant, a young couple with a newborn, had called me because the water heater wasn't working. I drove over with my toolboxes at 68. I still handled most of the repairs myself, and sure enough, the thing was shot. I was explaining the situation when a black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. Out stepped Marcus, sunglasses on, hair slicked like he was arriving at a movie premiere instead of a crumbling old rental. "Uncle Bob," he said smoothly, ignoring the tenants completely. "What are you doing here?" "Fixing the water heater," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. He glanced at the tenants, then back at me. "You don't have to do that." "I've got a guy." I raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you have a guy?" Marcus smirked. "Since. I'm the manager now." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through something, then flashed a screen at me. It was an email, supposedly, from me, authorizing him to oversee repairs and collect rent. The tenants looked confused. I felt my stomach twist. "I didn't write that email," I said flatly. Marcus just shrugged. "Well, somebody using your account did." He turned to the tenants. "All charm. Now don't worry, folks. We'll have a plumber here by the end of the day. And from now on, just contact me directly for anything Uncle Bob's earned his rest." The couple nodded uncertainly, clearly, not wanting to be caught in the middle. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder as he headed back to his car. "Relax, Uncle Yule. Thank me when you're not crawling around fixing pipes at your age." He drove off, leaving me standing there with the rag balled up in my fist, heat rising in my chest. That smug grin again. That tone of dismissal, like I was nothing but an obstacle to be brushed aside. That night I sat at my kitchen table again, staring at my old Dell laptop. My email was open. Sure enough, the message Marcus had shown the tenants was in my sent folder, but I hadn't written it. I hadn't even been online that day. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. Someone had hacked my account. Or maybe Marcus had just logged in somehow. I'd been careless. Sam password, for years, written down in an old notebook in my desk drawer. I cursed myself for being so naive. Still, seeing that fake email gave me something I hadn't had. Before proof that Marcus was forging my communications, that was evidence. And evidence could topple even the slickest con man. The next morning, I called Henry Hares in my email. I told him sending fake messages, change your passwords. Henry said, "Now," and set up two-step verification. I scribbled down notes as he explained, feeling like a student again. I'd always been slow with technology, but suddenly I had motivation. When I hung up, I spent the next 3 hours securing everything. Email, bank accounts, even Facebook. Marcus might be slick, but I wasn't going to hand him my life on a silver platter anymore. But Marcus wasn't slowing down, if anything. He was accelerating. A week later, I got a letter in the mail from the Charleston County Clerk of Court. My stomach dropped as I unfolded it. It was a notice of transfer for property management, again supposedly signed by me, notarized and filed. I stormed down to the courthouse the next morning. The clerk, a weary-looking woman with glasses perched on her nose, pulled up the file. She turned the screen toward me, and there it was. Again, my signature. "That's not mine," I said, firmly. She frowned. "It looks valid. If you want to contest, you'll need to file a petition. Do you have representation?" I nodded stiffly. "I do." When I left the courthouse, The humid Charleston air felt suffocating. Marcus had filed documents in my name. He wasn't just circling the estate anymore. He was actively trying to take it. That night I met Henry again. He read through the paperwork, his jaw tightening. Marcus is playing dirty. If he's submitting forged documents, that's fraud. But he's covering his tracks well. I slammed my fist on the table. So what do we do? Henry leaned back, eyes narrowing. We build a case, slowly, carefully. We collect every piece of evidence, emails, letters, documents. Then we nail him in court. But, Bob, you need to be patient. This won't be quick. Patience. It was the last thing I wanted. But Henry was right. I couldn't just march into Marcus' apartment and throttle him. No matter how much the thought tempted me, I had to be smarter. Over the next month, I became a shadow in my own life. I kept meticulous note states, times, conversations. I saved every suspicious email, every letter. I even bought a little notebook from a CVS and carried it everywhere, jotting down Marcus' movements. It wasn't easy. Marcus strutted around Charleston like he already owned the city. I saw him pulling up to the rental unit in that Mercedes, swaggering into the lobby of the Bennett Hotel on King Street like he was closing million-dollar deals. He took Alyssa out to dinner at Husk, flashing his father's swatch like a trophy. And worst of all, my family seemed to be siding with him. My sister would call me, her voice hesitant. Bob, maybe Marcus is right. Maybe it's time to let him handle things. You've been through so much. I'd hang up before I said something I'd regret. The betrayal stung worse than the humid summer air. It wasn't just Marcus. It was everyone believing him over me. Then came the night I finally caught him, red-handed. It was lot close to midnight when I drove past the Meeting Street property. I had a hunch, one of those gut feelings that gnaw at you until you listen. Sure enough, Marcus. Mercedes was parked out front. I killed my headlights and sat in the dark, watching. A few minutes later, Marcus came out the front door with a folder tucked under his arm. He wasn't alone. A man in a suit walked beside him, shaking his hand. They spoke briefly, then the man left. Marcus lit a cigarette, leaning against his car like he didn't have a care in the world. My hands clenched the steering wheel. What was in that folder? Lease agreements, forged signatures. I grabbed my phone and snapped a few photos from the shadows. The images were grainy, but they showed Marcus with the folder, with the suited man at midnight. It wasn't proof of fraud, but it was suspicious enough to raise eyebrows. The next day I showed the photos to Henry. He studied them, then nodded slowly. This is good. We'll need more, but this is a start. Marcus is up to something. And if we can link it to fraudulent documents, we'll have him. I felt a surge of determination. Marcus thought he was untouchable, but I was closing in. The more I watched, the more cracks I found I learned. Marcus wasn't paying the property taxes on time. He was pocketing rent money instead of depositing it. He was using the rental units as collateral for flashy development deals that never materialized. And he was getting cocky, too cocky. One afternoon, I confronted him outside one of the properties. Marcus, I said, blocking his path. I know what you're doing. He smirked, adjusting his sunglasses. Do you? Or are you just confused again? Uncle, that word confuse made my blood boil. He wanted people to think I was senile. He wanted to paint me as some doddering old man who couldn't tell his left from his right. I leaned in close, my voice low and steady. You may think you're smart, but you've made mistakes. And when this comes crashing down, I'll be there to watch. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Just a flicker, but it was enough. That night I sat at my desk with my notebook spread open, photos and documents scattered around me. The evidence was building slowly, painfully, but surely. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a small smile. Marcus thought he was the hunter, but he didn't realize he'd already stepped into the trap. The trap was far from finished, though. And before I could spring it, Marcus pulled a move so brazen, so reckless, it nearly knocked me flat. The trap was far from finished, though. And before I could spring it, Marcus pulled a move so brazen, so reckless, it nearly knocked me flat. It started with a phone call. I was sipping coffee on my porch when my cell buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but it had a Charleston area code. I answered. Mr. Lawson, a polite female voice asked, "Yes, this is Bob. This is Kimberly from Seaside Bank. I'm just calling to confirm the loan documents you signed last week." Congratulations on the approval. I nearly dropped the phone. Loan documents. What? Loan documents. There was a pause on the other end. Sir, are you saying you didn't sign for a $250,000 line of credit against your properties on Meeting Street? My heart slammed in my chest. Absolutely not. I didn't sign anything. The woman hesitated. Sir, the documents are notarized and filed. Your signature is on them. I sat frozen, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Marcus, it had to be. Marcus, Mom, I said, forcing calm into my voice. I need you to put a hold on that loan immediately. That signature is forged. We'll be down there in an hour. I drove straight to the Seaside Bank branch on King Street, heart pounding like a war drum. The banker Kimberly was waiting with a folder of documents. She slid them across the desk, and there it was. Again, my forged signature. Clean, confident, almost perfect. He used my properties as collateral. I muttered. Kimberly looked uneasy. Sir, if this is fraud, you'll need to file a police report, but you should know these documents have already been processed. Funds are scheduled for disbursement by the end of the week. I clenched my fists. Marcus had nearly taken out a $250,000 loan in my name. If that money disappeared, I'd be on the hook. I left the bank shaking with rage, my shirt clinging to me in the sweltering Charleston heat. Marcus had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just about property anymore. He was dragging me toward financial ruin. I went straight to Henry's townhouse. He opened the door, took one look at my face, and said, "What happened?" "Marcus," I hissed, shoving the bank folder into his hands. "He took a loan in my name, $250,000. Henry's jaw tightened as he scanned the papers. "This is serious. If the funds disperse, you'll be liable. We need to stop this. Now." He pulled out his phone, dialing a contact at the county prosecutor's office. Within an hour, we had a temporary freeze placed on the disbursement, but it wasn't permanent. Without hard proof that Marcus had forged my signature, the loan could still slip through. Henry looked at me gravely. "Bob, this is bigger than just family squabbles. Now Marcus is committing felony fraud. If we play this right, we can take him down for good. But we need undeniable evidence." My anger hardened into something sharper. Then, well, get it. I knew Marcus wouldn't stop. People like him never did. They pushed until someone pushed back harder. And I was ready. The next few weeks turned into a chess match. I shadowed Marcus quietly, noting every suspicious move. I followed his Instagram stories, where he bragged about big deals in Miami and Atlanta. I checked property records weekly, watching for sudden transfers. Then one afternoon, I got a call from one of the tenants on Meeting Street. "Mr. Lawson," she said nervously. "Marcus came by and told us rent checks should be made out to his company." "Now, not you," he said. "It's official. What company?" I asked sharply. She hesitated. Something called Low Country Developments, LLC. I felt my blood boil. Marcus had set up a shell company siphoning my tenant's rent check straight into his own pocket. That night I confronted him. I waited outside his sleek apartment building on East Bay Street watching until he strutted out, with Alyssa on his arm. When he saw me, his grin widened. "Uncle Bob," he drawled, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" "You think you're clever?" I growled. "Setting up shell companies, forging signatures, stealing rent," Alyssa snorted. Marcus just smirked, stepping close enough that I could smell his cologne. "Face it, Uncle, you're finished." "Everyone knows you can't. Keep up, my dad's legacy deserves better than some tired old man patching water heaters. I'm the future. You're the past." I wanted to hit him. My fists ached with the urge, but I forced myself to stay calm. "You're making mistakes, Marcus," I said coldly, "and I'm watching. When you fall, it'll be there." For a split second, I saw it again. That flicker of doubt. But then his smirk returned, cocky as ever. He wrapped an arm around Alyssa and walked away, leaving me seething in the humid night air. The following week brought a turning point. I hadn't expected I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a man's gravelly voice said, "Is this Robert Lawson?" "Yes. You don't know me. Name's Carl. I used to work with Marcus. We had a falling out. Let's just say I know how he operates, and I think you'll want to hear what I've got." I stiffened. "Why are you calling me?" "Because Marcus burned me same as he's trying to burn you. And I've got proof mails, contracts, recordings. Hez sloppy. He thinks he's smarter than he is." I gripped the phone tighter. "Why? Help me?" Carl chuckled bitterly. "Revenge, old man. Same reason you're in this fight. We agreed to meet at a diner off Savannah Highway. A grimy little spot with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like burnt tar." Carl was rough-looking, maybe late 40s, with a crooked nose and tattooed hands. He slid a thumb drive across the table. "Everything you need," he said. "Emails showing Marcus forging signatures. Audio of him bragging about it. Even copies of the shell company filings where he forged your name as co-signer." I stared at the thumb drive like it was a loaded gun. "Why give this to me? Because Marcus owes me 40 grand and stiffed me. He deserves to go down. Consider it poetic justice." I pocketed the drive, my pulse racing. For weeks, I'd been scraping for scraps of evidence. Now, in one stroke, I had a weapon sharp enough to cut Marcus to pieces. Henry's eyes widened when I handed him the thumb drive. We plugged it into his laptop, and sure enough, Carl hadn't lied. There were dozens of emails between Marcus and his cronies, casually, discussing forging my signature, hacking my email, and setting up fraudulent companies. And the recordings, my God. The recordings, Marcus's voice, unmistakable, bragging to Alyssa about how he'd outsmarted the old man and would own everything by the end of the year. Henry leaned back in his chair, whistling softly. "Bob, this is it. This is the nail in his coffin." For the first time in months, I felt a surge of triumph. The nephew who had humiliated me, dismissed me, and nearly bankrupted me, his own words would be the rope he hung himself with, but I wasn't ready to strike just yet. Not until Marcus truly believed he'd won. Only then would the fall hurt the way it was supposed to. Their next family dinner was at my sister's house again. I showed up calm, collected. Marcus was there, grinning smugly, bragging about a big project in Atlanta. Halfway through dinner, he leaned across the table. "Uncle Bob, it's time. You stop fighting this. Everyone knows it's over. Just let me handle things." I smiled faintly, sipping my sweet tea. "You might be right. Marcus, maybe I should stop fighting." He grinned wider, certain he'd broken me. But in reality, I'd already loaded the bullets into the chamber, and soon, very soon, I'd be pulling the trigger. The question was, how should I go straight to the police? Leak the recordings to the family. First file a lawsuit. Henry urged patience. Let Marcus think he's ahead. The more rope he has, the tighter the noose. So I waited. I smiled at Marcus's smugness. I let him believe I was beaten. And all the while I sharpened the knife behind my back. What I didn't know was that Marcus, drunk on his own arrogance, was about to push me even further than before. He wasn't done humiliating me, not yet. What I didn't know was that Marcus, drunk on his own arrogance, was about to push me even further than before. He wasn't done humiliating Menot. Yet it happened at the Rotary Club banquet in Charleston. I'd been a member for over 20 years, though since Daniel's passing, I hadn't attended. Much Henry convinced me to go. Show your face, he said. Remind people you're still standing. I wore my best navy blazer, the one Daniel and I had bought together for his son's college graduation. The Francis Marion Hotel ballroom glowed with chandeliers and the air smelled of roast beef and wine. Old friends shook my hand, asked how I'd been holding up. For the first time in months, I felt almost normal. Then Marcus arrived. He strode in late. Alyssa on his arm, dressed like a movie star. People whispered, as they passed, the shiny watch, the confident smile, the way he slapped backs, like he owned the room. And then, to my shock, he headed straight for the podium. The chairman introduced him. Ladies and gentlemen, one of Charleston's rising young developers, Marcus Lawson. My stomach twisted. Rising young developer. He wasn't a developer, he was a fraud, but Marcus took the stage like he'd been born there. Thank you, he said, flashing his grin. As many of you know, my father left behind a strong legacy in this city, and I'm proud to continue that work. With my uncle stepping back from the family estate, I've taken the reins. Big things are coming to Charleston, new housing projects, revitalization plans. Were going to transform this city. I felt the blood drain from my face. Stepping back, he was painting me as retired, senile, finished. People turned to glance at me, some with pity, others with skepticism. I wanted to stand, to shout, to tell them he was a liar, but Henry's words echoed in my head. Patience. The more rope he has, the tighter the noose. So I sat there, fists clenched in my lap, while Marcus basked in applause. Afterward, he sauntered over, smug as ever. Uncle, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. Did you like my speech? Don't worry, I gave you credit. Told everyone you're enjoying retirement. Retirement. I repeated, my voice low. Sure, everyone believes it now. You can relax. Let me handle the hard stuff. Isn't that what you wanted? I forced a smile. That's exactly what I wanted. But inside, I was seething. That was the moment Marcus stopped being just a greedy nephew. He became my enemy. The humiliation cut deep. In the days after the banquet, I could feel the shift. Old friends called less neighbors looked at me differently, like I was already halfway gone. Even the tenants at the Meeting Street properties stopped calling me for repairs. Marcus had rewritten the story, and I was the fool who let him. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I met with Henry. The next morning, we spread Carl's evidence across his dining table, mails, recordings, shell company filings. This is enough to bury him, Henry said. But if we file now, it'll be a long court battle. Hell, deny everything. Drag it out. The key is timing. We need to hit him when he's overexposed. When he can't wriggle free. I thought of Marcus's speech at the Rotary banquet. The way he'd promised big projects. He's bluffing, I said. But what if we make him prove it? Henry's eyes narrowed. What do you have in mind? Let him get cocky. Let him announce something big. something he can deliver. Then we pull the rug out from under him publicly, not just in court, but in front of everyone he's been lying to. Henry leaned back, a slow smile forming. Now you're thinking like him, but sharper. The chance came sooner than I expected. 2 weeks. Later, I got a call from my sister Bob. She said nervously, Marcus is hosting a launch party at the Charleston Place Hotel. He says it's for a new housing development in Mount Pleasant. Everyone is invited, even the mayor. I hung up the phone, my pulse racing. This was it. Marcus was setting himself up for a very public fall. Carl's files had already given me the ammunition. The Mount Pleasant deal was a sham. Marcus didn't own the land. He didn't have permits. All he had were forged papers and empty promises. I told Henry, and he grinned. Perfect. Well, let him make his announcement. Then well expose him for the fraud he is. They Charleston Place. Hotel ballroom was packed the night of the launch. Chandeliers sparkled overhead and waiters weaved through the crowd. With trays of champagne, business leaders, city officials, and socialites filled the room buzzing with excitement. Marcus stood at the front, microphone in hand, looking like a conquering hero. Alyssa hovered nearby, beaming like she'd already married into wealth. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus declared, tonight I unveil the future of Charleston Low Country Developments. Is proud to announce the Harbor View Residences luxury condos in Mount Pleasant, state of the art. Amenities, waterfront views, the works. Construction begins this fall. Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. Marcus basked in the spotlight. And then Henry stepped forward. He raised his voice above the clapping. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I hate to interrupt, but there's something you should all see. The room quieted. Heads turned. Henry held up a folder. The documents Carl had provided at these so-called Harbor View residences. Henry said loudly, Fraudulent Marcus Lawson doesn't own the land. He forged his uncle's signature to claim it. He forged bank documents too, attempting to secure loans in his uncle's name, and here's the proof. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Marcus' face drained of color. That's a lie, he shouted. But Henry pressed on, pulling out the audio recordings. He played one on a small speaker. Marcus' voice filled the ballroom. The old man will never see it coming. By Christmas, everything's mine. The crowd erupted. Murmurs, outrage. People pulling out phones to record. The mayor himself shook his head in disgust. Marcus tried to shout over the noise. That's out of context. That's fake. But it was too late. His mask had slipped, and everyone saw the liar beneath. The fallout was immediate. Investors pulled out. Tenants stopped paying him. The bank froze his accounts. By the next morning, the story was all over the Charleston Post, and Courier local developer accused of fraud forgery. Marcus called me that night, his voice desperate. Uncle Bob, please, we can fix this. You don't have to destroy me. I let the silence hang for a long moment. Then I said quietly, You destroyed yourself. Marcus, I just made sure everyone saw it. And I hung up. But even then, Marcus didn't go down quietly. He hired lawyers, tried to spin the narrative, claimed he was the victim of a smear campaign. He even accused me of elder abuse, saying I was being manipulated by Henry. It didn't matter. The evidence was airtight. Carl's files, the recordings, the forged documents. Marcus was cornered. The state opened a criminal investigation. Fraud, forgery, wire fraud. Marcus' smug grin was gone the next time I saw him, in a mugshot splashed across the evening news. But my war wasn't over, because Marcus still had one last card to play, and I wasn't prepared for how far he'd go to save himself. My war wasn't over because Marcus still had one last card to play, and I wasn't prepared for how far he'd go to save himself. The day after his mugshot, hit the papers, I thought the nightmare was over. I walked downtown and people I hadn't spoken to in months stopped me on the street. They shook my hand, clapped me on the back. "You did good. Bob," they said, "that boy had it coming." For the first time in a long while, I felt the weight on my chest lift, but Marcus wasn't done, not even close. It started with the vandalism. I woke one morning to find the windshield of my old Chevy pickup smashed in glass glittering on the driveway like ice. A spray-painted message covered the garage door. "Liar." My neighbors watched as I cleaned it up, their faces tight with discomfort. No one said it out loud, but I knew what they were thinking. Marcus, that night my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Uncle Bob," Marcus's voice hissed on the line, low and venomous. "You think you've won. You haven't seen anything yet." "Marcus," I said coldly, "you're finished. Turn yourself in, make it easier." He laughed bitterly. "I'll burn everything before I let you have it. You hear me, everything." The line went dead. Henry urged me to file a restraining order. Hare's dangerous now. Bob, hare's cornered and cornered animals lash out. But Marcus was slippery. Every time we thought we had him nailed down, he twisted away. His lawyers filed motions to delay the fraud case. His girlfriend, Alyssa, went on Facebook Live crying about how Marcus was being framed by his bitter old uncle. Some people even believed it. Then came the lawsuit Marcus filed against me, personally, claiming I was defaming him, interfering with his business-spreading lies. The papers arrived at my door like a punch in the gut. I stormed into Henry's office, Hez suing me. After everything he did, Henry held up the papers calmly. "It's a scare tactic, Hez hoping you'll back down, maybe settle. Don't bite." But the damage was done. My name was dragged through court filings whispered in coffee shops. People asked me in hushed tones, "Bob, is it true? You're in some kind of family feud. Is Marcus really innocent?" The humiliation stung again, sharp as ever, but this time I did let it break me. Instead, it hardened me. Marcus had declared war, and I was going to finish it. I doubled down. I hired a private investigator, a wiry ex-cop named Jim with a sharp nose for dirt. Jim dug deep into Marcus' affairs following the money trail. What he found was worse than even I imagined. Marcus wasn't just stealing from me. He was running a whole web of scams. Fake LLCs, bogus real estate deals, money funneled through shell accounts in Georgia and Florida. He was knee-deep in debt to loan sharks, and more than one associate was after him for unpaid promises. "Your nephew's got enemies," Jim told me grimly. "And not the kind who send polite letters. The kind who break legs." I almost laughed, almost. But then I remembered Marcus's threat on the phone. "I'll burn everything before I let you have it." And my smile vanished. Sure enough, the fire came. It was a sweltering night in July. I woke to the acrid smell of smoke. I stumbled out of bed, heart pounding to see flames licking at the side of my garage. The dry wood caught fast heat, blistering my face as I rushed to grab the hose. Neighbors came running, calling 911. By the time the fire department arrived, half the garage was gone. The chief shook his head. "Looks like arson," he said. I already knew who it was. Henry was furious. "This crosses the line. We're going straight to the prosecutor." But Marcus was slippery, always slippery. There was no camera footage, no witnesses, just suspicion. And suspicion wasn't enough. That was the lowest point, standing in the charred wreckage of my garage, the smell of smoke clinging to my clothes. I wondered if Marcus was right. Maybe he'd destroy everything before I could stop him. But then I thought of my father, of Danielov, the promise we made never to squander what he left us. and something inside me steeled. I wasn't going to let Marcus win. Not with fire, not with lies, not with lawsuits. It was time to strike back. Henry and I crafted a plan. Wednesday counter. Marcus's lawsuit with one of our own, elder, fraud, forgery, financial exploitation. Wednesday stacked the charges until he couldn't breathe under the weight. But more than that, we'd go public. Let's take this to the people. Henry said, expose him in the court of public opinion before the trial even begins. So we did. We handed Carl's recordings to the local news. We gave interviews. I sat in front of cameras, trembling, but determined, telling Charleston exactly what Marcus had done. The story spread like wildfire. Nephew, exploits, uncle faces, fraud charges. People who'd once doubted me rallied to my side. The tide turned. Marcus cornered again, lashed out, worse than ever. He went on a local radio show calling me senile, accusing Henry of manipulating me. He posted rants online threatening lawsuits against anyone who spoke against him. But the more he shouted, the guiltier he looked. And behind the scenes, Jim, the investigator, uncovered the smoking gun. A bank account Marcus controlled, funneling stolen rent checks directly into his name. Hard numbers, hard proof. Henry grinned when he saw the printouts. This ends him. The day we filed our countersuit, I felt like I could breathe again. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, cameras flashing as Henry and I walked inside. Marcus arrived minutes later, pale and sweating, his lawyer babbling at his side. I caught his eye. For the first time, there was no smirk, no swagger, just fear. Inside the courtroom, Henry laid out the evidence. Forged signatures, fake companies, stolen rent, the recordings of Marcus bragging, the fraudulent loan attempts piece by piece. The picture became clear. Marcus wasn't a victim. He was a predator. His lawyer tried to object, tried to spin, but the evidence was too strong. And when Jim testified about the shell accounts and unpaid debts, the judge's face hardened. Marcus looked smaller by the minute, slumping in his chair. Alyssa sat behind him, her eyes wide with panic. By the end of the hearing, the judge ordered all assets frozen pending trial. Marcus's empire crumbled overnight. His Mercedes was repossessed, his bank accounts seized, his name once whispered with respect in Charleston. Circles became a joke, but even then he still had one last desperate move to make. 2 nights later, I came home to find my front door ajar. My heart lurched. I stepped inside, and there he was, Marcus, sitting at my kitchen table, pale, disheveled eyes. "Wild uncle," he said hoarsely. "We need to talk." I froze. "Get out of my house." He held up his hands. "Please, just listen." Finished. "The banks, the courts, they're going to bury me. But you could save me. If you just drop the charges, I'll walk away. You can keep everything, it'll disappear." I stared at him, my chest tight. This was the same nephew who had humiliated me in front of family, forged my name, tried to burn me out of my home. Now he was begging like a child. "No," I said softly. His face twisted. "If I go down, it'll take you with me. I'll tell them you were in on it, that you signed everything. They'll believe me." I stepped closer, my voice calm but steel-edged. "Try it. No one believes you anymore." "Marcus, you're done." For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then, with a broken laugh, Marcus stood and walked out. The door slammed behind him, rattling the frame. That was the last time I saw him free. A week later, the police came knocking. Marcus had violated bail conditions, tampering with evidence, threatening witnesses. They hauled him off in handcuffs. His empire was dust. But for me, the war wasn't over because Marcus still had to face trial, and I had to sit in that courtroom, day after day, reliving every betrayal, every humiliation, every threat. And I had to watch him fall. The trial began in late September, in the Charleston County Courthouse on Broad Street, a grand old building with white columns and echoing marble halls that seemed to weigh down on you with history. I'd walked those steps many times in my life, but never as the plaintiff in a case against my own blood. The media swarmed the place, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Mr. Lawson, how does it feel to face your nephew in court? Do you believe justice will be served? I kept my head down, Henry at my side. I wasn't there for headlines. I was there for justice. Marcus arrived flanked by lawyers. His suit rumpled, his face pale. That cocky grin was gone. He looked smaller, somehow swallowed by the weight of the courtroom. Alyssa was nowhere to be seen. Inside, the air was tense, thick with whispers. The judge, a stern woman with steel-gray hair, called the room to order. State versus Marcus Lawson. And so it began. The prosecution opened with the forged signatures. They projected them onto a screen. My real signature beside Marcus's forgeries. The differences were subtle but clear to a trained eye. An expert witness testified, pointing out the inconsistencies, the slant of the letters, the pressure of the pen. I watched Marcus squirm. Then came the bank fraud. Kimberly from Seaside Bank testified, explaining how Marcus had attempted to secure a $250,000 loan using forged documents. She looked right at me when she said, Mr. Lawson assured me he hadn't signed those papers, and I believe him. My chest swelled with something I hadn't felt in months' vindication. Next came the tenants. One by one they testified about Marcus showing up demanding rent be made out to low country developments. Some said they were threatened with eviction if they didn't comply. A young mother teared up on the stand saying Marcus told her I was too old and confused to manage the property. I clenched my fists under the table. That humiliation cut deep, but hearing it out loud in court with Marcus sitting there powerless to stop it, it was healing in a way I hadn't expected. Then came the recordings. The prosecutor pressed play, and Marcus' voice filled the courtroom. The old man will never see it coming. By Christmas, everything's mine. Gasps echoed through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Marcus's lawyer jumped to his feet, shouting objections, but the judge waved him down. The second recording played Marcus bragging to Alyssa about forging documents, mocking me as senile. I felt my stomach twist, hearing it again. By this time, the whole world was hearing it too. Marcus sat, rigid eyes darting wildly, sweat glistening on his forehead. His mask was gone, Henry whispered. We've got him. But I wasn't satisfied. Yet I wanted Marcus to face me, to see what he'd tried to destroy. When my turn came to testify, I walked slowly to the stand, my knees stiff, my heart pounding. I raised my hand, swore the oath, and sat down. Mr. Lawson, the prosecutor began, can you tell the court in your own words what your nephew did? I took a deep breath. Marcus betrayed me. He betrayed our family. He forged my name on documents, tried to steal the estate. My father left us, tried to bankrupt me. He called me senile, told people I was finished, but I'm not finished, and I won't let him take what generations before me built with their own hands. My voice trembled, but I pressed on. This isn't just about money. It's about respect. It's about legacy. My brother Daniel would be ashamed of what his son has become, and I won't stand for it. The courtroom was silent when I finished. Even the reporters stopped scribbling. Marcus wouldn't look at me. The defense tried their best. His lawyer painted Marcus as ambitious but misunderstood, claimed I was exaggerating, claimed Henry and Carl manipulated me. They even suggested I had memory problems due to my age, But then Carl himself took the stand. Rough, tattooed, bitter, but credible. He laid it all out. The scams, the lies, the unpaid debts. He handed over emails, contracts, recordings. He admitted his own role, but made it clear Marcus was the mastermind. By the time Carl stepped down, Marcus looked like a drowning man grasping for air. The climax came in cross-examination. The prosecutor cornered Marcus about the shell company, Low Country Developments isn't. It true, Mr. Lawson, that you listed your uncle as co-signer without his knowledge? Marcus shifted in his seat. I thought he'd approve. Thought or forged. Marcus stammered, his voice cracking. It was a mistake. The prosecutor slammed the folder shut. No further questions. The silence was deafening. The smug, untouchable nephew, who once humiliated me in front of family dinners and banquet halls, now sat crumbling before a room full of witnesses. When closing arguments ended, the judge's instructions rang clear: fraud, forgery, financial exploitation, serious charges. The jury filed out. I sat frozen, every nerve taut. As hours dragged on, Henry whispered reassurances. But my mind was elsewhere, flashing back to the night. Marcus waved those forged papers in my face, calling me too old to manage my own life. When the jury returned, my heart hammered so loud I could barely hear the words, "Guilty on all counts." The room erupted. Reporters rushed out to file stories. The judge's gavel banged for order. I closed my eyes, a single tear sliding down my cheek. It was over. Marcus slumped forward, his lawyers' hand on his shoulder. The judge set sentencing for the following month. Marcus was led out in handcuffs, his eyes glazed with shock. I watched him go, feeling no joy, only a heavy, quiet satisfaction. Justice, finally. But the sentencing was still ahead, and Marcus, even guilty, still had venom left to spit. From jail he wrote letters to my sister, to neighbors, even to the Post and Courier claiming. It framed him, claiming I was vindictive, claiming he was innocent. He begged for sympathy, painted himself as the victim of a family vendetta. Some people believed him, some always would, but the tide had turned. Most saw him for what he was, a conman brought down by his own arrogance. At sentencing, the judge was merciless. Mr. Lawson, you exploited your own family, committed fraud, and nearly ruined lives. I sentence you to 12 years in federal prison. Gasps filled the courtroom. Marcus's knees buckled. The deputies had to hold him up. I sat there steady as the gavel fell. 12 years. My nephew, once so smug and untouchable, was going away for more than a decade. Afterward, people asked me how I felt, triumphant, relieved. The truth was, I felt hollow. Revenge isn't fireworks and fanfare. It's a quiet thing. A weight lifted, a scar left behind. But when I walked out of that courthouse, the Charleston sun, warm on my face, I thought of my father, of Daniel, of the promise we made. And I knew I had kept it. Marcus's downfall was complete. But for me, the story wasn't over yet. Because even after prison bars clanged shut behind him, his shadow lingered. And I had to find peace with what I'd done. Even after Marcus was sentenced, I couldn't shake the feeling of his presence. Revenge is never as clean as people think. It doesn't end with a gavel strike or a prison door slamming shut. It lingers. It seeps into the corners of your life like smoke after a fire. At first, the quiet felt strange. For months, I had lived in battle mode, watching, planning, gathering proof, bracing for Marcus's next move. Suddenly, it was over. The estate was safe, the tenants were steady. The properties were back in my name. My garage had been rebuilt by some neighbors who offered to help, and for the first time in over a year, I could sit on my porch in the evening without scanning the street for his Mercedes. But the silence was heavy. I'd wake at night to the memory of his voice. The old man will never see it coming. He'd sit in my kitchen with a cup of coffee staring at the chair where he once smirked at me begging for mercy. And he'd wonder, had I really won, or had I just lost something I couldn't get back? The town had its opinions. Some treated me like a hero. At the farmers' market on Marion Square, people stopped me thanking me for standing up to Marcus. You gave folks like us hope, one man said, prove that liars don't always win. Others were quieter, uneasy. My sister, for one, barely spoke to me. She loved her son no matter what he'd done. At family gatherings, the air was tense. Her eyes filled with a hurt I couldn't heal, head still. "My boy," she whispered once. "Prison won't change that." I didn't argue. What could I say? I'd saved the estate, but I'd lost my sister's trust. That was a wound no court could fix. Henry tried to lift my spirits. "Bob, you did what had to be done. Marcus made his choices. You just refused to let him bury you." I nodded, but deep down I knew revenge doesn't end with clean victories. It leaves scars and the guilty on the innocent, on everyone caught in the blast. Still, there were moments of peace. The tenants sent thank you. Notes grateful that their homes were stable again. The bank restored my accounts. Slowly, I rebuilt my reputation. But one afternoon I received a letter in the mail. It was from Marcus. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the envelope for a long time before opening it. The handwriting was jagged. Desperate Uncle Bob. "You ruined me, but you should know. You didn't beat me. You just put me on pause. 12 years isn't forever. When I get out, we'll start over. You can't stop me. People forget. They always forget." My hands trembled as I folded the letter back into the envelope. His arrogance had died. Even behind bars, Marcus believed he'd rise again. I burned the letter in the sink, watched the flames curl the paper into ash. Then I rinsed it down the drain. Months passed. The seasons shifted. Charleston's sticky summer gave way to the crisp bite of fall, then to the damp chill of winter. Life settled into something resembling normal. But I never forgot. Every time I walked down Meeting Street and saw the rental units, I remembered. Marcus grinned as he told tenants I was too old to manage them. Every time I sat at the courthouse cafe for lunch, I remembered the way he squirmed on this stand, and every time I looked at the rebuilt garage, I remembered the flames. One evening I visited Daniel's grave. The cemetery was quiet, Spanish moss hanging low from the oaks, the air heavy with the smell of earth and salt from the harbor. I stood there, hands in my pockets, staring at his name carved in stone. "Danny," I whispered, "I did what I had to do. Your boy, he wasn't the man you wanted him to be. He tried to tear us apart, but I stopped him. I protected what Dad left us. I kept the promise." My voice cracked and I bowed my head. But I don't know if I won, brother, or if I just survived. The wind stirred the moss above me, whispering through the branches like an answer I couldn't quite hear. The years rolled on. Marcus faded from headlines. Just another inmate number in the federal system. My life regained its rhythm, quiet mornings repairs on the properties. Evenings on the porch, watching the sun sink over the harbor. But sometimes late at night I'd picture him in that cell, pacing, plotting, waiting. His letters, words echoed in my mind. 12 years isn't forever. And I'd wonder when he walked out of those gates, one day older, but still hungry. Would he come back for me? Would the war start all over again? That question haunts me still. But if he does come back, we'll be ready, because I may be old, but am not done. I've fought once, and he'll fight again if I have to. Marcus taught me that family can be your worst enemy. But he also taught me something else, that even at 68, even when the world calls you finished, You can still rise, still fight, still win. And if Marcus ever darkens my door again, I'll remind him of one simple truth. The old man saw it coming after all. The end.